Welcome to Crafty Sourcer. If you're looking for a raw, unfiltered podcast on all things sourcing in APAC, you've come to the right place. Grab a coffee or wine and join your host and other guests as we dive deep into the complex and ever-evolving world of sourcing, keeping you informed on insights, tools, and even at times, a healthy sourcing debate or two. Now, here's your host, Denise Pereira from Kaleidosource. Settle in and let's get crafty.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 31 of Crafty Sourcer. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Steve Prince, and I'm guest hosting for Denise while she's enjoying a break. I'm so glad you're joining us, and let's get crafty. So, this week's session will be a little bit different. Denise and I have had a chat, and we realised oftentimes when we talk to our peers, we talk with people who are already in the job, who have maybe done it for a couple of years. One thing we felt is maybe we explore, what if you had to set up a sourcing function day one? And the situation is you've applied for a job, you've got the job, and they've said, hey, can you set up a sourcing function? And knowing that I've set a few up in my time, Denise tapped me on the shoulder and said, Steve, can maybe you walk us through your process? So I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes here now and just really run through, for new people perhaps, maybe joining the sourcing leadership area, kind of what to expect from day one, maybe what to think about, and by all means, one thing I love about sourcing is that it's a very broad church. This is not supposed to be, this is the exact way to do it. This is supposed to be a discussion about it. This has been my experience. So by all means, if you have different experiences, if you think maybe, Steve, you've missed something, please reach out to Denise or I, and we would love to have that conversation. But I just wanted to run you through right now some of the top things that I would think of if I'm thinking, hey, we need to set up a sourcing function. So first point, I would really try and understand the world that I'm in. And by that, what I mean is, broadly speaking, we find a lot of the time that we're used to that mentality of just copy and paste sourcing of, if I was a sourcer at company X, I know exactly what it's like to walk in and start a sourcing function at company Y. Broadly speaking, there's probably a couple of different aspects to that. So with sourcing, generally you may be sourcing in an agency model, including maybe RPOs or the disability network. You might be doing in-house sourcing, so working for a company. You might be doing executive search. You could be doing advisory, consulting, intelligence, or you could be doing freelance. Now, the interesting thing there is they are all distinct animals. They're all different and distinct. And one thing I guess I would like people to consider is that your approach would actually change from day one because the needs of the business would change. So with that, we would look at skills. What kind of skills are you looking at? I always like to think of this bit like a radar plot. So you look at different aspects of it. So one area could be relationship building. So if you're an executive search, for example, you're going to be very heavily invested on building deep relationships at senior stakeholder level. So it's not about transactions, it's not about filling a role in 6 days. And if you had gone from an agency mindset to an exec search sourcing model, you're going to find there's a lot of difference. So there's relationship building, then there's industry knowledge. Do you need to be an absolute specialist in your industry, or can you be a generalist and bring those skill sets in and really benefit from being able to maybe not know the answer exactly, but know where to go to look? Then we have stakeholder communication. So we talk about, if you're dealing with stakeholders, so if you're dealing in-house and you're in a large multi-country operation as a sourcing head for Australia, New Zealand, for example, and those of you who have checked my LinkedIn will know that that was an area that I ran. That will be very different to a smaller in-house function, or it would be much different to an intelligence or an advisory capacity, because you're looking at different things and you're dealing with different levels of stakeholders and more stakeholders as well. So they're kind of more interested parties. Then we have change capacity. So is it a completely new function in a team? How big is the business that you're coming into from day one? So as sourcing manager, a sourcing lead, what are you looking at of going, okay, I need to build this function? Or is it more a case of, okay, I need to work within their established rule sets, or they don't know what they need, they just know that they want sourcing? That often does happen. Sometimes you will get recruiting companies, for example, as they get bigger, they will want to build in a sourcing functionality, and they might not have had that before, but they've worked with sources. So if you're coming in as lead, how do you want to really establish those boundaries and work together? Because it's never about being antagonistic. It's never an us versus them. It's always how do we work together. So then there's change capacity. How willing are they to flex? How comfortable are they with change? With that as well comes sourcing advocacy. Your personal ability and capability to advocate for sourcing because it's a new function. A lot of the times the business will come in and say, this is what we expect. Great, no worries, that's fantastic. But also as a lead for yourself, what are you looking to do to really grow that relationship? And then lastly, you'll notice a difference in responsiveness. How soon do stakeholders need information? For example, if you're working on a competitive intelligence document, maybe they've given you 3 weeks or 2 weeks. If you're working on a search for data architects, maybe you have a day. So how responsive are people, and how responsive do they need the sourcing function to be? And also, what type of information do they need as well? So in the skill set we look at relationship building, industry knowledge, stakeholder communication, change capacity, sourcing advocacy, and responsiveness. Then we look at what outcomes do leaders expect? What's their understanding of sourcing capability and flexibility? We all go through the interview process. Yes, great, I understand sourcing, handshakes, offer letter, fantastic. When the rubber meets the road, what do they expect? Sourcing, because sourcing has moved on from a lot of people, maybe have come up in the time when it was a case of, especially in Australia and New Zealand, sources were very much seen as the junior partners to recruiters. It was very much seen as, okay, you start as a sourcer, and if you do well, you become a recruiter. And those of you who've listened for a while will know the landscape has very much changed since then. So we don't really think of it anymore as high transaction, as the sourcing is the way to start. Sourcing in itself has built a career out of being a sourcer. So really want to check day one, day two, what's their understanding of sourcing capability? So do they know that sources can quite often, or sources really should be, contributing to things like DE&I practices, graduate programs? It's sourcing can link and flex with different departments and divisions, absolutely, because it's really about how do we build a message that brings passive candidates in. So we have understanding sourcing capability and flexibility. Then we have KPIs, metrics. Sourcing metrics tend to be historically a little bit underapplied. Oftentimes a classic metric is very much driven around how many phone calls did you make, how many LinkedIn messages have you sent, or emails, or what have you. That doesn't really jibe well with sourcing because of the flexible nature of it. So as a consequence, what happens is you have a situation where, let's say you had a metric that said you need to send 20 messages, and on Friday you'd send 15. Well, what are you going to do Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock? You're just going to bang out 5 messages to whomever, really, if you're struggling. You're just going to go, I just want to tick this KPI box. So as a leader, when you're talking about KPIs, you really want to talk about moving the conversation further down of okay, how many people that are getting sourced, what does success look like for people coming in sourced to going to interviews, to going to second rounds, to going to finals, and so on. Then we have timeframes. So do your leaders expect people to be able to turn around in a day and give you 40 qualified perfect people? What are their timeframes? What are their expectations, and how do you work with them? And then you have, conventional with that, you have check-in schedules. So what works best for them? Do they need one-to-ones every week? Do they need kind of project-based? So example, check-ins will look different at an in-house on a project basis versus an agency, because you might be doing check-ins 3 times a day if you have a quick brief on an agency that needs candidates. Whereas an in-house role, if you're looking at a role that maybe the process takes a month, then you've got defined check-in points. And then the final consideration really we look at is, what does the environment look like? So do they have established interview templates, bearing in mind the experience for a candidate, for a passive candidate coming in through the system, is much different to an experience to an active candidate. These aren't people who are responding to an ad. These are people who we're bringing into the process. So can they tweak it? Can they do they understand the difference when interviewing, and the types of information that you also need to share? Because one of the things we remember is that with passive candidates, we're actually more likely need to share more information at the start, because it really builds a trust. It builds a level of mutual investment, because we're not looking to just simply go, yep, what's your name, your title, your REM, thanks very much, move them forward. We really want to build that relationship. So with their interview templates, do they have something set up that allows for that flexibility? Then in terms of, if you're in a large in-house role, what do your peers expect? If you have multiple heads of recruiting coming to talk to you, you'll find out very quickly that they will have different experiences with sourcing. They'll have different expectations of sourcing. Some will be from the mindset of, I should be able to just give you a brief and then you come back to me with 10 people. Some of them will want to know, I want to know every step you do in this process every time. And that's how do we work around it. So then we have leadership's vision for your function as well. So then we have, in terms of the leaders, what are they looking for out of the function? So executive search leadership is most likely looking for something like, I want really good intelligence that I can give to our clients to really build that trusted advisor state. So I really want to understand what is the level of your communication skills so that you can communicate at a high level. Whereas an in-house role might be, we just want to be able to place X number of candidates and so on. Process modification. And again, this comes back to the fact that active candidates and passive candidates do come through the system a little bit differently. So there will be an element of, that's great that you've done recruiting this way, but here's how we can adapt it to really able to showcase the passive candidate experience and really smooth things for them. And then finally, we want to consider in the environment section, how does sourcing embed across the business? Now, that doesn't matter if you have 3 stakeholders or if you have 20 or 100. It's how do we actually take this offering out and really start to showcase and move the conversation away from, this is the magic that happens that nobody sees, to here's our sourcing lead and this is what they do and this is what their team does, to really help drive the conversation. But look, I just want to leave it there. This wasn't supposed to be a 20-minute conversation. This was just meant to be kind of an overall, if it's your first day setting up a sourcing function, this is what we really look to, is understand your world, consider the skills, what outcomes the leaders expect, and then what's the environment like. And then I guess the fifth one, the bonus one, would probably be, what do you want to bring to it? Understanding points 1 to 4, how can you shine? Because it's also about taking advocacy for yourself and the sourcing function as a whole. But look, I'm sure we're going to have a great time exploring the world of sourcing more while Denise enjoys a very well-earned break. Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to many more conversations, and stay crafty.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode, and we'll be back next week with another exciting episode. If you found this valuable, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. That helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Once again, happy sourcing and stay crafty. Until next time.